afternoon and welcome to the first Residential Property Forum of 2024. Very pleased to see so many of you here, and for the inquiries which have been raising some questions which hopefully Ian will be dealing with later. As before, Ian will be starting the session talking about some topics, also talking to our special guest today, Tom Bailey, who's got some interesting products that can be very useful to law firms. And then we'll open the discussion. It is your forum. Most important thing is you asking questions and then sharing information. So with that in mind, Ian, I'll hand over to you and let's get started.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you very much. A massive thank you to Stewart Title, as always, for organising these events. The Scottish Forum has done so well, is so popular. There's a number of things to sort of let people become aware of. Number one, we've got lots and lots of speakers and contributors that want to come along. So we've got someone from the Registers of Scotland, we've got someone from search companies, we've got insurers, a whole raft of different people that want to come along and attend these events. If you can think of, or you'd like other people to come along, or you have ideas, let us know, and we're very receptive to have people such as Tom along today to share what they're doing and to share with you their products, etc. In addition to that, we're going to publish on a quarterly basis a property law publication, an update with regard to case law and things that are happening in Scotland. We're in negotiation with one set of chambers that's a set that looks exclusively at property related issues to again contribute to that. So just keep an eye out for that. If you're interested, we'll make that available. It will be free for the first year, so if anyone's interested, let us know. As Robert was saying, this is your hour, so if there are any burning topics that you've got, feel free to drop us a note and we'll endeavour to incorporate them. Derek Beaumont has sent a question in and we'll touch on some of what Derek was asking about. He fired that across my desk this morning, or sent it to Liz, who fired it across my desk this morning. We'll have a look at that. As Robert says, in the last sort of session, part of the presentation, anyone that's got any burning issues, fire away. But let me know about anyone you'd like to come along to speak. Let us know about topics that you're encountering in connection with your work. Let us know about any sort of burning issues you're encountering. And if you are interested in a property law monthly sort of publication coming out to you, let us know about that as well. So anyway, massive thank you to Stewart Title. Welcome. We've got John and Elizabeth, who are the Stewart Title contacts in Scotland, attending today. Hi, John, and hi, Elizabeth. But lovely to see you both. I'm sort of acting as coordinator today and sort of putting my two penneth in for what it's worth. But first of all, before we do anything, I'd love to introduce Tom Bailey from Postpartner. Tom and I met, and I think, Tom, we met because you asked me to sing or make a contribution to a song, didn't you? And my knowledge of IT was so shockingly bad that I wasn't able to do whatever you required to do, which, to be fair, Tom, was a blessing in disguise. But thank you very much for the invitation. And Tom, could you just explain a little bit about what you're doing at Postpartner and how you think you could help attendees today with regard to post management, if I can call it that?
Of course, yes. Well, firstly, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Stewart Title, for having me along. Very nice to be here with you today. At Postpartner, we sort of deal with a very niche issue, I suppose, in hopefully a very effective way. So I've sort of worked in the sector in various roles for about 18 years before happening upon this problem that I think exists, and our clients certainly agree with it. And it's the wasted time that happens, and it's specifically the wasted time of lawyers and fee earners when it comes to managing inbound documents. And I'm talking about the moving, trying to find them, moving them around and renaming them. Any kind of inbound document. So traditionally, Ian, we've helped firms mainly with their inbound daily post. So people think of that, oh, so you do scanning. Well, there is a scanning element to it. It's what happens after the scanning, really. It's making sure that it arrives exactly where the fee earning teams want the document to be with the correct name on it. so that then the lawyers can sort of pick it up quickly and do what they want to do what they need to do with it. And with certain systems as well, you can actually then train the system itself to pick up the next task, but it does have to be in the right place with the correct name on. So that's been our traditional use case, but increasingly, and we're working with a big firm in Scotland as it happens. I'm speaking to them again later today, so we're deep into negotiations on not just the daily post, but also managing inboxes, so inbound email, and also portal documents. And the specific use case for that firm is they get documents in from LMS, which I'm sure a lot of the attendees today will do. And we can automatically move rather than even an admin team or a fee earning team doing the work themselves. We can use our software to automatically allocate and index those documents. Hopefully that's an overview of a sort.
Thanks, Tom. Yes. So one or two questions. Being typical Yorkshireman, cost issues. How does that work? How do you get paid for your services?
Yeah, so it's done on a license basis, Ian. So depending on the volume of inbound traffic and whether or not it's just the post or it's just an email, just emails or just portal documents, firms require a varying number of licenses, and we just cost that out on that basis. It's a monthly cost, and it's costed very competitively in such a way that, with the efficiencies you gain, you want more licenses, not less, because it means that you're automating more of your processes, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's how we do it.
Yeah. And the other question is, like you were saying about the client that you're in negotiation with at the moment, are you able to sort of pivot and sort of amend, reform, alter what you've got to suit the needs of a firm or a contact or a prospect? So it's not just a question of, the product's in the box, there you go, take it or leave it. To what extent can you sort of assist so that if there is a niche issue or a particular problem, are you able sort of to provide more of a sort of consultancy role and a design role rather than just saying, there's the product, it might work, it might not, sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and every client we have is got some similarities, obviously, but they've also all got differences, and it is a customized product in the sense that we come in and find out exactly what it is that each firm wants to achieve. A good example of this is that every firm that I've ever worked with have their own document names. So one firm might want to call something a mortgage deed. Someone might want to call each and every document that comes in a Halifax mortgage deed, or a whatever they want. So we design, we customize the document name list, and equally, when it comes to sort of building automation off the back of the documents that come in, different firms will have different preferences, and different firms will want to invest more in automation, and others will say, well, I've got admin staff who can help us do that. So we'd rather do it this way than that. So it's highly customizable, and I suppose in the later sort of in the more recent discussions, it's also about, well, we're not so fussed about the posts anymore, because that's very manageable for us, but we are very worried about email traffic, so we would like to use a solution for that. So
All right, great, thank you. Can I just ask a question of everyone attending today? Does anyone sort of outsource this service that sort of Tom's sort of alluded to? Does anyone currently do that, or do you, with hard copy post, is it a sort of an admin function that junior members of staff deal with? I can see, as Tom's saying, as we get less and less hard mail, if I can call it that, and more email management and document or attachment management, that I would like to call it, becomes more of an issue. But anyone like to sort of put their head on above the parapet and say, yeah, we use this, or we're interested, or no, we don't need it because we deal with it internally? If we can sort of leave that as a sort of the first chat question of today, what I'd like to do is, first of all, thank Tom for his time. Tom, if you would like to stay with us, and if there are any questions arising, I'll revert back to you before we finish. So the first question to anyone attending today: is anyone using this service or the idea that Tom has with an existing company? Is anyone interested in talking to Tom about it? Has anyone got any ideas about how they manage post, hard copy post, emails, etc.? Or perhaps is it is an issue that you haven't really thought about? Whatever, you can answer anonymously in the chat facility. The next thing I want to do is to just let you know that we are going to be talking with Robert about Stewart Title products in the sort of halfway through the presentation, through the forum today. And Robert's contact details are on there. But what I would like to do is to talk about some issues relating to these topics. First of all, I want to talk about onboarding clients and the client sort of experience with regard to onboarding. Does anyone here have a sort of sales team that deals with onboarding clients? I was talking to a firm last week, and they have a sales team that deals with inquiries. And the reason that I was talking to them was that they're encountering problems in that the person or people actually dealing with the conveyancing are not actually obtaining the instructions and dealing with instructions. Sales team deal with the initial inquiry, then the matter is handed to fee earners, and there's sort of a mismatch between what sales is saying the firm can do, timescales, etc., and then what fee earners, when they actually see the transaction, can do. So how many people here have a sort of an onboarding team or a sales team that deals with inquiries? How many people would actually deal as a fee earner with the inquiry and start the matter and onboard the client directly as part of the file opening process? So anyone shed any light on that as an issue to start with? Again, I'm interested because, as I say, this firm was saying to me, look, this is an issue, this is a problem that we're encountering, and we'd like to know, what we can do. What I say is, one, where you are getting people dealing with onboarding clients, it's imperative that they understand the conveyancing process and understand where a matter is unusual and requires a fee earner to have a look at it before the transaction's taken on. My first boss used to say to me, the secret in conveyancing work is to spot the nightmare transaction or spot the nightmare client, or worse, the combination of the two, and say, unfortunately, look, we can't act. Or we can act, but someone very experienced is going to have to deal with the matter, and we're going to charge you an awful lot more for the work that's involved. So again, I'm just interested into how you onboard clients and what you do. I know professional indemnity insurers are worried about firms onboarding clients and taking on work without sort of auditing or doing the risk assessment relating to the work. So anyone got anything to share, any ideas relating to that? Do your fee earners or receptionists or people that are the first point of contact with clients have any sort of assistance or guidance as to the sort of work that you do, or where transactions need sort of specialist intervention to determine whether we're taking the work on or what we're charging for? Anyone got any views on that in the chat facility? No one's got any comments to make on that one so far that I can see. Let's just have a look in the Q&A. If there isn't, I can move on to my second question. Planning and dealing with planning. I just want to pull up some notes on the slide and just ask you one or two questions about how you deal with planning. Right, hang on. Sarah, Priyanka, thank you so much. So let's just have a look at this and go back to that point. In my office, the fee earner dealing with onboarding, we do get, but we believe that the fee earner must evaluate the risk. Sarah, that is, I think, the safe way to proceed. Okay, because the fee earner can get a feel of the client, get a feel of the transaction, decide whether or not you feel capable and competent in dealing with the transaction, whether you want to deal with the transaction, and then can determine what we're going to do with regard to fees. So I think that's so important. And Priyanka, thank you. Reception takes details and issues, quote, the client wishes to proceed will then refer to our outsourcing team. Yeah. So some transactions where we'll directly on board as well. So Priyanka, can I ask a question? Do you have criteria that the reception team and the outsourcing team are aware of, so that they're able to sort of how would I describe it? They're able to sort of assess the transaction and say, well, yeah, this is an unusual transaction. This isn't the sort of thing that we normally do, or there's someone, a specialist in a different office that will deal with that sort of work. Is it that sort of thing? Interesting. And what does everybody else think then? I do think that there are problems. Well, I know there are problems where someone other than the fee earner that is going to be dealing with the work is actually onboarding the client. Yeah. So there are certain types of work, there are parameters, Priyanka, that the team can say, yeah, we're happy to do it, and yeah, we're happy to give a fee or a quotation or an estimate as to fees. Can I ask Sarah and Priyanka, on the issue of fees, do you have a quotation? Do you have fixed fees? How does that work? And again, working with some insurers, talking to insurers last week, one of the things they're saying is, where you're dealing with an unusual transaction, where you're dealing with something that is out of the ordinary, where there's urgency, where there is specialism required, then we should be charging for the work. This was raised in the context of the Building Safety Act in England, which is regarded by government as specialist work and for which firms should be charging. There is case law that says if you give a quotation or estimate with regards to work, then you're obliged to comply with that estimate unless there's an objectively valid reason for revision upwards or downwards. So the general rule is that if you give me a quote or an estimate to act for me in connection with a purchase, then you're obliged to adhere to that estimate or quotation unless there's an objectively valid reason for revision upwards or downwards. And the point there is you're obliged to tell me where a transaction is proceeding and becomes out of the ordinary and where the original estimate or quotation no longer applies. So again, I think it's important that we're careful about that. If we're giving, or members of our team are giving estimates or quotations to clients, that there is some form of protection, some form of condition attached that says, that we need to look at the transaction before we can fix our fee or before we can give a firm quotation. Yeah, okay. Priyanka, fixed fees, but we'll review the quotation for increase. Yeah. Client advised the outset potentially increase of the transaction is more complex. Yeah, certainly important to adopt that. Certainly, again, Priyanka, if the transaction does become more complex, then what we should be doing is we should be revising our retainer. Remember, we spoke about this in the past, increasing the extent of the retainer to deal with those additional issues, and then say to the client, there's a cost implication here. Sarah, we have a fee scale, but it's not set in stone. A fee of things will be complexity. Head of department should be consulted as to an appropriate fee. Sarah, yeah, great practice. Another thing here, again, talking to insurers, professional indemnity insurers in Scotland, important, you should be collating data as to the sorts of work that you're doing, and you should be reviewing that data. So let's say we're dealing with, standard sort of residential property on the outskirts of Edinburgh and in the Lothians. And then all of a sudden we start doing tenement work in Scotland, in Glasgow or Edinburgh. Well, if we're doing work that's different, we might need different policies, practices and procedures, and therefore it's important to assess what sort of work we're doing. It's important to assess it from an insurance perspective to make sure that appropriate fee earners are doing the work that they're capable of doing. And it's also important to gather data so that insurers can look at risk and risk profiling. I mean, to be honest, in my day, that wasn't looked at. It was the number of transactions that the Resi team were doing, commercial property team, commercial team, and other departments. And there would be, that you'd be paying more insurance if your firm was heavily involved in residential work as opposed to anything else. But these days, there is a degree of complexity and sophistication with regard to what insurers are looking at. So, for example, an insurer was saying to me, if you were a traditional high street firm that had dealt with standard residential sales and purchases, in the suburbs, as it were, and then all of a sudden you start dealing with flats and tenements and nothing else, then the insurer would want to see, A, what sort of experience you have, what sort of procedures, etc., you've changed or created to deal with that work. For example, I was talking to a firm recently who was saying that in the past, courtesy of their website, they were taking work on from all over the country and internationally. But then what they decided to do as policy was to say, no, the risk profile with regard to that sort of work was too high. Client identity issues were arising, fraud issues were arising, all manner of different things were arising. So we're not going to do that anymore. What we're going to do is pivot and do work that's local to our branch offices. And we weren't going to take any work on that involved distance clients or international clients. Well, again, if you're doing that, your policies and procedures need to be revised. In that case, you know, that perhaps less experienced staff were capable of dealing with day-to-day transactions. And the idea of filtering the sort of work that was coming in and allocating it to relevant fee earners to an extent reduced. So I think it's important to do that. So Sarah, Priya, thank you very much for that. Anyone else got any comments on that before I move on and start talking about some issues relating to planning? Anybody else got any comments? All right, well, let's have a look at planning. And again, question, as far as planning is concerned and as far as listed buildings are concerned, in your retainer, in your report to the client in connection with performing due diligence, how do you deal with planning? Again, what I always say is that it's your task in a residential transaction always to ascertain client objective. Why is your client buying this particular property? And to assess or determine whether or not there are any plans or intentions with regard to development. So, you know, the client says, well, yeah, I'm buying this property in Cumbernauld, and the intention is to demolish what's there and to build something new, or to build a home office, or to do whatever it is. In those circumstances, am I, as a conveyancer, making it clear to the client that all I'll be doing is advising about the current planning status of the property that's being acquired? Or am I going to provide assistance to the client with regard to any planning issues that arise? And am I also, in the example that I've just given you, going to be required to give advice or assistance with regard to construction issues? Again, we're back to this issue about scoping the retainer and about being careful to make sure the client understands what we're not doing with regard to the transaction. That's not to say, if you feel competent or you have a planning department or a construction department, that you can't provide assistance and advice and guidance to the client. But as a transactional property lawyer, again, we need to be careful about just making sure the client understands the extent of our role with regard to the transaction. There's an interesting article on planning and listed building. I don't know if you've seen it on the Edinburgh Conveyancing Forum. Have you all seen that? There's some useful resources on that forum website, which are worth a look at if you haven't seen them already. Any questions or any comments on that, or can I move on? Next thing, with regard to environmental issues and climate change, not much really I want to say about that, other than be careful about environmental searches and reports that are obtained. A search will normally give you historical data about land use. A report will give you a risk assessment associated with what that land use generates with regard to environmental issues. Again, important that clients understand, unless your firm carries expertise or you do, that you won't be giving advice on environmental issues that the report generates. Can I ask, does everyone recommend to any client buying any type of residential property of the need and benefit of an environmental search and report? Is it one of the things that you would always raise, or would it depend on locality and depend on type of property? Interested in what people say about that. Sarah, Priyanka, given the fact you volunteered in connection with the first issue I raised, what would you think about that as a point? And anybody else, what do you think? interested to see what we're doing with environmental searches and reports. By the way, we are getting someone from the Coal Authority to come along to talk to us about coal mining. Charlotte, hi Charlotte. Depends on location, the nuclear area. So we're do in some instances. Is that Dunbar or is that up north, Charlotte? Or Ross? Is it West Coast, Faz Lane and around there? Caithness, all right, yeah. So that was it Dunray or something at one point? Is it still there? Yeah. Okay. And again, so do you simply say to a client it's available, Charlotte, or do you say, look, we must do this? Yeah, still being taken apart. Yeah. My friend's father was an engineer at Dunray, I think when they were building it many years ago. So yeah. Okay. So again, Charlotte, so what do you do with regard to that? Do you say, hey, look, it's something you should consider? Or do you say, we must do it? And do you get any lenders, Charlotte, saying we want to know about this? Is it Torness that's just south of Dunbar where there's I think is it decommissioned, that one or not? Marie, hi Marie. We may suggest a report, but not make it clear that we're not qualified. Exactly, yeah. Jonathan, hi Jonathan. Not very often, no. Again, I had this debate in connection with another webinar I did this morning, right, on searches. I think there's two schools of thought, and this is why I get shot down sometimes. I say that you need to tell clients there are searches that we've got to do because of locality, because of transaction. There are searches that may be appropriate given locality. I'm of the view that, and I'm reluctant to say this because I know what the problem is, I'm of the view that we should be saying to clients, but by the way, here's a list of other searches that we could do. Now, a lot of people will say to me, Ian, if you do that, you're going to get bombarded with questions from clients about, well, what is an agricultural search? Or what is a utility search or whatever. I get that. But I think that there might be a client who's concerned about a particular issue. So I was looking at a negligence claim this morning where a firm escaped liability, but the client was saying, I was buying a new property. It was in a peaceful location. I was buying it because it was in a peaceful location and because it's quiet. And you didn't tell me that there was a new busy link road that was being constructed a quarter of a mile away. So you were negligent. Now, the court said the lawyer wasn't negligent, but you can see how the client raised the allegation. Right, Charlotte, if the property is near an exposed area, certain beaches, we do that because there's a risk also of being within there. Very common to be aware of the same, yeah. So you've always got to check your lender's instructions. And again, in England now, you are required to check lenders' instructions when you receive them, but also you're required to check them again when you exchange contracts. I don't think the same applies in Scotland. But thanks for that, Charlotte. Yeah. Just something to be aware of, isn't it, with regard to environmental issues. I'm not going to talk about climate change today. I do want to talk about the Building Safety Act in Scotland. Have you all seen the Housing Cladding Remediation Scotland Bill? And have you seen the changes to the Building Scotland Act 2003? The bill, I think, went before Parliament in November. So have you seen it, everybody? I'll tell you what the bill says, and I'll try and cobble together some notes relating to this if I've got time. But you need to be aware that the bill going through the Scottish Parliament confers on Scottish ministers the power to identify and address external wall cladding systems on buildings that pose risk to human life by carrying out single building assessments. So this is Scottish ministers being able to identify such properties and to instigate the obtaining of single building assessments, providing for the creation of a cladding assurance register, extending liability for breaches of legislation to certain responsible individuals where the breach involves their consent or connivance or is attributable to any neglect on their part. Now, there's a number of points with regard to that. First of all, if you're buying a property within such a building, then management costs, etc., are likely to increase as a consequence of responsible individuals or responsible persons as defined under the Building Safety Act for fulfilling their duties under the Act. And it also, the new legislation enables Scottish ministers to make regulations establishing responsible developer schemes. So what you've got to this is a sort of slightly different tack in Scotland to the Building Safety Act in England. But you've got a number of things that are important. First of all, the bill is in the consultation process, so it's not law. The consultation process expired on the 8th of December, but the consultation outcomes are awaited. The law will become law mid-2024. Now, who knows what that means? Again, you know, Parliament and Scottish Parliament work in mysterious ways, don't they? But it's something to be aware of. The key feature of the bill that I want practitioners to understand is that there is a requirement for a single building assessment. So there's a requirement for a single building assessment to be performed for any building that has an external wall cladding system, contains at least one flat that's used or intended to be used as a dwelling, is at least 11 metres in height above the ground, and are flattered as defined by Section 16 Land Registration Act. So has everyone seen that bill? Anyone sort of alive to the fact that how that can generate problems for conveyancers potentially? So it applies to buildings which have been constructed or refurbished between the 1st of June 1992 and the 1st of June 2022. So you've got, in essence, a sort of 30-year period, haven't you, of buildings that are potentially subject to the bill and subject to single building assessments. Quite interesting to see that, and I'm also interested to see what the Scottish Government does and how it deals with these buildings, because the Building Safety Act in England is receiving a lot of criticism in that it is not providing property owners with the safeguards that I think people expected relating to the Act. The idea of ensuring that the owners of buildings or those that did work to the buildings that is now defective, being liable for the cost of remediation. Debbie, it's nothing to do with EWS1s, okay? Not law yet, likely to become law in the middle of this year. And I'll just repeat it for you, Debbie, so that you've got it. And I will try and get some notes together for you so you've all got that. But it's called the Housing Remediation, the Housing Cladding Remediation Scotland Bill. That was out for consultation. Consultation expired on the 8th of December. We're still waiting to see what that consultation generates, but we're told it's going to become law in the middle of this year. And then you've also got changes to the Building Scotland 2003 Act by way of building standards enforcement and sanctions concerning consultation. Again, not law, but becoming law, Debbie. So is that all right, Debbie? Have you got that? And remember, all an EWS1 is an opinion, isn't it? So, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, there's an EWS1, therefore we just provide that to the client or the surveyor. I think that's a dangerous thing to do. Hey, Debbie, not a problem. That's, you know, part of the reason that we're here today to sort of discuss things. Okay, so I've talked about that. Nothing there that I think requires sort of urgent attention. Has anyone had any sort of advice from surveyors about this aspect and about building safety risks, etc.? And about the fact that, you know, a standard survey is unlikely to generate information concerning building safety risks. So the idea really is that this report, if I can just find it again. Where are we? Yeah, the single building assessment is really concerned with risk associated with Building Safety Act, fire risk and risk of collapse of buildings. Okay, right. Robert, good afternoon, Robert. It's just about 1 o'clock, I think. And Robert, thank you once again, you and Liz and John, for organising these events. And what I'd like to do, Robert, if I can, is just have a chat with you about some of the title products that are available and about some of the services that you're able to offer practitioners in Scotland. And Robert, I know John and Liz are sort of the experts on the ground, as it were, but it'd be good if you could just share with delegates and attendees today a little bit about what you're doing with regard to your platform and accessibility to that platform for insurance product.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. One of the issues we've been looking at is really how to make policies more easily available, so they form part of your desktop and you can actually use them as and when you need them. So we have our online system, Stewart Solution, and we have enhanced that at the end of last year with the aim of making it far more flexible. One of the problems sometimes with online systems is they are inflexible and you quite easily get knocked off and have to go through, and then our team, John, needs to look at it. So what we've done is to make the system more flexible going forward. We've introduced some variable assumptions. So if the property doesn't fit neatly into the categories that used to be there, you can now vary it and make the policy actually fit your property more easily. And the idea there is that most quotes can now be done online. You can go on and either type in the policy you're looking for or look at our drop-down list of policies, which list all of the relevant ones for Scotland, which you're seeing some of the examples there. You can then order them via the platform, vary the assumptions to match the property and get a draft quote fairly quickly. We also have a quick quote feature on there, which allows you within certainly 30 seconds to actually get a quote for a policy, indicative quote. So if you're ever having to discuss it with a client, get an idea of fees, then that can be added very quickly to it. The system's very easy to use. We do have some training on it, some videos there, and Liz is very happy to come along and do training for you to help you onboard people onto the system, and then just to show you some of the quirks in there to help you use it more effectively.
Thanks for that, Robert. So, Robert, I've just put your contact details on there, and if anyone visits the Stewart Title website, you'll get Liz and John's contact details too, I guess, yeah?
Exactly, yeah. And anything that comes through to me, I'll pass through to Liz and John, because they are the experts in this area. Yeah.
Thank you. Could I just ask attendees then, and again, you don't have to answer, you can answer anonymously as well. Have you taken out a title indemnity insurance policy in the last sort of month or so? And what sort of risks are you wanting title indemnity insurance for? If you could just add in the chat box for me, that would be useful. I think useful for you as well, Robert.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we want to see what people need policies to cover. And also, in many cases, one of the issues is that how lawyers use language and how insurers use language is not always the same. Very lucky to have John, who's experienced in both sides of it, to translate there. But sometimes it may appear to you that there isn't a policy that could help you, and in fact there is, and that's really the service we can give.
Yeah. While I'm waiting for people to say that, lack of servitude for access or services or crofting matters, says Marie. So Marie, yeah, I guess where you are, crofting matters are going to be a real issue for you. So Robert, John, anyone else, have we come across a policy in connection with crofting matters?
Yep, we do have crofting policy. We've got certain strict underwriting criteria on it. And it doesn't, just the fact that we only consider it. We can't say we can definitely do it, but we have issued crofting policies for various matters, and we do have very defined underwriting on all of that.
Yeah, Thanks for that. So, yeah, and anyone else got any other types of policy? Access is always an issue, isn't it? And provision of services, always an issue. Right, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Common policies we use: building standards issues, servitude issues, access and services, lack of local authority consents. Yeah, okay, again, Marie. Yeah, so John, again, if you're able to assist with what Sarah was saying, building standard servitude issues, the building standard point.
Oh, we don't actually do building standards as we've been talking about this morning as the Building Scotland Act, or Building Standards Act. What we cover is lack of planning permission, lack of building warrant documentation, so that's building warrant and completion certificate. We do look at listed building consent, lack of listed building consents. They're obviously more difficult because listed building itself doesn't prescribe. So they're more difficult and probably more expensive to do. And we look at conservation area issues, which are in the main similar to the listed building issues.
Yes.
But to follow on from what Robert said, a lot of these are available online, so you don't you can actually go online and get them without actually coming direct to us. It's only when, as Robert said as well, when things fall off the system, i.e. they don't meet the underwriting criteria, that you then come to us. So you can get, you can't get listed building online, but you can get lack of planning and building control documents online, and it's probably easier to do rather than send an email to me, then I send documentation back. You just go online and it will print out the assumptions that you need to agree and the policy itself.
Thank you. Thanks for that, John. Has anyone had a risk that you haven't been able to insure? And then we'll move on to another topic. So has anyone had a risk that you'd like to insure, but you haven't had an insurance company that's been able to do it? So again, just interested in that to see if there's anything out there that's causing a problem that you don't have a sort of satisfactory result for. While I'm waiting for that, again, what I said in my introduction, Tom was talking about his product with regard to dealing with post. I was talking about whether or not there's an appetite for sort of a monthly electronic magazine, a quarterly electronic magazine dealing with sort of property law related issues. Is there an appetite for that? Is there an appetite for what Tom was saying with regard to dealing with emails and dealing with post? So I'm interested to hear what people have to say about those things. Meantime, I'm going to deal with something else. So we had a great question that was put this morning. We had a number of questions put by Derek Beaumont. So Derek, thank you so much for raising those questions. The main ones I'm going to deal with on our next occasion when we're together. But what we had is Derek asking about title sheets and what we think a title sheet is meant to do. So what do we think about title sheets that are generated, and how do we deal with them in the conveyancing process? Are we taking them as a snapshot? Are we saying that we've got to undertake further or additional investigation with regard to title? Just what is the position relating to a title sheet? Can I just say that as far as land registration is concerned, in England and Wales, there's been a number of issues with regard to land registration in that frequently a registered title, the register is a veneer. And when there is a problem or an issue relating to a property, it's a question of looking beneath the veneer to try and ascertain what the legal position is. And in my sort of life and the sort of work that I do, a lot of the time, the actual register isn't helpful. What I've got to do is sort of dissect what's happened before registration and look at documentation pre-registration to try and sort issues out. That's not uncommon. In Scotland, therefore, the question I'm posing is, how do we deal with a title sheet? Anybody who want to answer that? Anyone want to have a look at it? We are going to get someone from the Register of Scotland, and to be fair to them, they're delighted to come along and we'll talk about all manner of different things. So certainly, Derek, some of the questions that you're posing we'll save for that, but there are bits that we'll be looking at next time. So again, what do people think about that? Just welcome comments on it. One of the things I was talking to people about this morning, is you can't these days in the conveyancing process just simply provide documents to clients and say, read it. There's got to be an element of translation, an element of explanation relating to the document. And on the issue of advice, you're highlighting risk. You're not assessing risk. You're just saying to the client, look, Mr. Client, you need to understand and appreciate there is risk with regard to this issue or this matter that I'm drawing to your attention. But again, I'm just interested in what people have to say with regard to that point that Derek raised. Derek, I know you're with us today. Do you want to sort of share with us your views? That would be useful. You can put your microphone on and talk or enter anything you want in the chat box if you wish. However you want to do it, I'm quite happy. While I'm waiting for that one, has anyone else got any burning issues, any problems that are arising with regard to conveyancing? What's the market like? I was talking to an agent in Edinburgh that was telling me that they thought the market had quietened a bit. Now, I know Edinburgh is sort of an unusual spot in that it remains a bit of a hot spot. But it was interesting to see that they were saying it's quietened. Robert and I were discussing matters earlier today, and I think Robert and I are both of the view the market in England has quietened down as well. A number of factors, really. I think A, the economy. B, whenever you've got a sort of an election sort of looming, that tends to sort of, I don't think frighten people, makes people perhaps a little more reluctant to buy different property, buy up market or whatever. But again, I'm interested in what you're thinking. So is anyone sort of overrun with work at the moment? Is anyone willing to...
Shall I comment now that I found how to...
Hi, Derek. Yeah, lovely to speak to you, Derek. First of all, Derek, massive thank you for the email. As I mentioned earlier, we'll deal with some of it on the next occasion, and we'll ask the keeper of the register to talk about some of the issues. But just tell me a little bit about your problem with regard to title sheets. That would be brilliant.
Okay, my understanding was that the Seasons was a warehouse, and the solicitor and clients had to fathom it all out. On the other hand, Len Register is a guarantee from the keeper that this is the title, and in normal circumstances, one doesn't have to, in fact, sometimes can't go behind it.
Yeah.
Now, having taken that, I was involved in a transaction which was a single sheet of piece of ground split into three and then re-put together again.
Yeah.
Resulting in a title sheet, and I'm not joking, of 49,000 words.
Right.
Simply because, in my view, the keeper or her staff rather, simply looked at everything and clobbered it together as though she was putting everything into a warehouse.
Yeah.
I got some ridiculous things like a servitude that the owner could cross his own ground to get to the main road.
Yeah.
Although he owned the ground altogether. There was no thought. And that was my view. I'm just wondering if this could have been a one-off. I'm just wondering if other people find titles are getting longer and longer, or there's no communication with Register House.
Yeah. So in other words, Derek,
Scotland.
So what we're saying, Derek, is in essence everything is just thrown together, and it's a question of, well, you sort it. So you're having to filter that amount of data, which sounds ridiculous in my view. Whereas the whole idea of the register is simplification and ease and convenience from the perspective of a conveyancer. I'll tell you one thing, Derek, that you mentioned there with regard to the assembly of registered titles. In England and Wales, Land Registry don't like doing that at all. They don't like subdividing titles or reassembling titles because they're terrified of fraud and fraudulent activity, particularly with regard to splitting of titles. I know that doesn't apply here, but can anyone help Derek then with regard to the point he's making? Has anyone encountered that problem? Right. Gosia, hi Gosia. Actually, an issue with titles being amalgamated and potentially being extinct is no longer required. Regrettably, once you split the title, a fresh service is required to be created. So, Gosia, you've encountered this then, I take it. While I'm waiting for Gosia, Sarah says, on what I was saying about the market, estate agents for the West Coast, Glasgow, higher end of the market is slowing. Interesting. Sarah, talking about the West Coast of Scotland, I attempted over the Christmas holidays to purchase a property from the Church of Scotland. I was about to put an offer in connection with an old church that the Church of Scotland was selling. I went to inspect, luckily, in between Christmas and New Year, when all the bad weather, the heavy rain, etc., hit us. And on inspecting the property, there was an electrical substation to the rear that I knew about and was concerned about. But the thing that put me off putting a bid in was the fact that there was a stream that disappeared under the church. So at the top end of the church grounds, there was a stream that disappeared underneath the church and came out at the bottom of the grounds. I decided that I wasn't putting an offer in as a consequence. Garcia, as registered amount of a servitude note in Section 8, in fact, servitude may longer be existing. Good point. Okay. Anyone else got any points or comments to make about what Derek was saying there? And anyone, any comment in connection with what Garcia is saying as well? It seems that this is a problem. Okay. And again, it really means that you've got to earn your corn with regard to checking out amalgamated titles. Yeah. Again, that could be a problem. And the idea of sort of splitting off titles, again, you know, it's an issue, isn't it, that requires addressing. Okay, thanks for that. So we're going to park what Derek was saying and Derek's questions for next time. What I'd like to do is just finish today with another question. And that question concerns the Tenement Scotland Act 2004. And to ask you, first of all, if you've read a paper that I was reading over the weekend, which is really useful, by Professor Robert Rennie. I don't know if you know Robert, but he is at Harper MacLeod. And he wrote a paper for the Glasgow Conveyancers Forum and Edinburgh Conveyancers Forum about notices of potential liability for costs. Have you seen it? Again, I'd like someone from the Edinburgh Conveyancers Forum to come along sometime and have a chat about some of the things that the Edinburgh Conveyancing Forum have got on their website with regard to useful information. By the way, did everyone get that buyer's checklist that we talked about in the last forum? Did everyone get a copy of that? Has anyone not? I think there were some new faces today. If you haven't seen it, there's a useful checklist that was drafted by, forgotten the guy's name, who's kindly allowed it to be circulated to attendees. So if you haven't got it, send me an email and I'll get it to you. On the issue of emails, before we finish today, my email address on slide there. So if you have any questions, burning issues, if you have people that you'd like to come along to talk to you about anything, feel free to drop me a note and we'll get them to come along. We're going to get a search company to come along. We're going to get, as I say, the Register of Keepers to come along. We're going to get Coal Authority along. I've got a professional indemnity insurer that's coming along as well. But if there's anyone else that you think would be interesting, happy to do that. Just going back to our nuclear concerns, what's the search that you do for that? Is it just an environmental search that reveals it? Or is there sort of the Atomic Energy Authority or anything like that? Have they got information? Can you go to them directly? Silly question, I suppose, but just for my own interest, if anyone can shed any light on that would be good. So again, topics that we haven't sort of developed or taken any further. One, this idea about dealing with hard copy post attachments, etc.? Do we need a product that assists us? Second question that I posed at the start of the presentation, is there an appetite for a quarterly publication about property law? We're hoping for the pilot to be available sometime towards the end of March. But again, interested in whether there's appetite, interested as to what sort of content you'd like. So I'm interested in that. What I'd like to do is to, first of all, in my summing up for today, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone that's contributed. Massive thank you to you. A massive thank you for everyone attending. You've got to understand this is your hour, and we're happy to talk about any issues that you've got. And I'm happy to go scurrying off to do research or find people that can find answers for you. Second thing is, I repeat, I'm hoping to have a set of barrister chambers that will be regularly contributing and writing articles, etc. for us. I'm happy to write articles and to do research for us. Again, as far as Tom is concerned, I know, Tom, you're happy to provide any assistance or guidance to anyone that wants to know a little bit about your product. And I'm conscious of the fact that Robert and the team for Stewart Title are at hand to deal with any questions or queries that you've got. I want to finish today by just asking about the market. So the West Coast top end is quietening or softening. What about everywhere else? So Edinburgh, I know middle of Edinburgh is unusual, but what are we finding in the borders or up north? Or, you know, central belt? Just what's the market like? As I say, I'm seeing a quietening. How I see that, to be honest, is when the market quietens, demand for training increases. So I notice that we're absolutely bombarded with inquiries for training in England and Wales, and the reason for that is firms have got the opportunity now to upskill staff or look at development. When they're busy, they don't want to know about training other than things that are potentially dangerous and can bite with regard to claims. So, as I say, I'm seeing the market softening. In Scotland, as I say, I don't know the market well enough. I might get an agent to come along and have a chat about some issues with regard to the market at some point in the future, but I'm very interested in what you think. It is just about time to start wrapping up. So last call. Anyone got any questions or issues? Anyone got any topics for next time? So I've got Derek that wants to talk about a little more about registers. I've got potentially a couple of speakers that will come along and talk to us about various other things. But are there any other topics that are creating issues or problems for us? Do feel free to either send me an email or put something in the box. Right, Samina. Hi, Samina. Central and South Side, Central Glasgow, quiet for residential, very busy commercial. Yeah, Samina, I think what happens with resi, it's very cyclical and it does quieten off. With commercial, I find, and Robert, you might be helping on this, I used to find that with commercial work, it would sometimes fall off a cliff. So you'd either be really busy and then bang, it would go, and then it would be really busy again. Right, I'm just seeing someone's got their hand up. So if we can just make sure that they are able to talk. If we could do that, that would be great. So can we allow whoever's put their hand up to say whatever they'd like? I think your microphone should be, yeah, RICI register. Thanks, Carol. So I'll make a note of that. Happy to talk about that next time. There was another question in the chat, which I had. Mortgage lenders at the moment. Yeah. Happy to talk about that. I tell you what's really interesting. There's one lender that's really ahead of the game with regard to digitization. I might get them to come along actually, because it's really interesting what they're doing and what they're trying to do. So Carol, yeah, RCI register, happy to do that. Mortgage lenders, happy to talk about that. Anything in particular, Sarah, with regard to mortgage lenders? What are the issues that you're having? Demands with regard to instructions and reasonable demands relating to instructions. What you've got in England now is lenders saying we're not going to chase or follow up with regard to post-completion of transactions. The reason for that is they can get data from the land registry direct. So, Sarah, I'm just waiting for you to add if there's any particular issues, or drop me a note by email with the issues that you'd like to talk and we'll deal with it. Again, Samina, I'm assuming from that that you do commercial work as well. If you want to widen the issue, you know, and start talking about commercial as well as resi, happy to do that either within this forum or to create a separate forum for commercial work, whatever you want. Sarah, thanks for the clarification. Yeah, processing, general communication, duplication of work, demands on instructions. Yeah, thought it would be all of that stuff. Sarah, definitely do that. Anybody else got anything else? So if you want a separate forum for commercial, if you want us to touch on some commercial issues, hey, more than happy to do that. Not a problem at all, but really it's down to you. It is, however, after 1:30, and what's left for me to do is to thank you all very much for coming along today. Tom, thank you for giving up your time today. Robert, John, everybody else, thank you very much from Stewart Title. And thanks for your time. Remember, topics, send me an email. Any speakers, send me an email. Anything else that you think is of interest, let us know. And we'll look forward to seeing you next month, where we'll have a whole raft of other issues. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Sarah. It's really, I tell you what the interesting thing is, that we don't have the same amount of contribution in our other forums. So we get more contributors. But what we don't get, which is really interesting, is the amount of people that attend and stick with it. So I'm taking from that a positive. But, you know, if you want the microphones on, if you want to use something other than a chat facility, you know, let us know and we'll see what we can do. But I really enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe and look forward to seeing each other on the next occasion. Cheers, Tom. Thanks, John. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Robert. Take care. Bye-bye.